Ever feel like your chord progressions are missing something? Like they're good, but not great? The answer might just be 7th chords. Think of them like adding an extra floor to your musical building. More depth, more emotion, and more style. In this video, we're breaking down the 3 essential types of 7th chords: major 7th, minor 7th, and dominant 7th chords. These chords are the key to adding depth, emotion, and complexity to your music. And here's the best part. It's easier than you think to start using them today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly when and how to use each one to stand out effortlessly. Let's start with the basics. I like to think of chords like buildings in the city. This helps us to understand not only how they function, but also how they are constructed. The most basic chords are built with 3 notes and are called triads. So we can think of these like a 3-story building. On the ground floor is the most important note, the root note. This note is the foundation of the chord and from which we measure the distance to all other notes. It's also what gives the chord its relevant letter. For example, C major and C minor chords would both have the root notes of C. You'll often see this note represented with the letter 1. On the first floor of the chord building, we have the 3rd note. You can see that there are 2 possible versions of this note, the major 3rd and the minor 3rd. As the name suggests, major chords use the major 3rd and minor chords use the minor 3rd. The difference comes down to the distance between each of these notes and the root note. The distance between 2 notes in music is called an interval. Intervals are measured using the smallest distance in Western music, which is called a semitone or half step. This is the distance between the notes on the piano or frets on a guitar. Major 3rd intervals span a distance of 4 half steps, whilst minor 3rd intervals span a distance of 3 half steps. So C to E would be a major 3rd, whilst C to E flat would be a minor 3rd. On the 2nd floor of the chord building is the 5th note. This note is a perfect 5th interval above the root. That is 7 half steps. So in both the C major and C minor chord examples, this would be from C to G. This 5th note is also either a major or minor 3rd interval above the floor below, depending on if this is a major or minor chord. For this reason, constructing triads is also known as stacking thirds. So that's how to construct major and minor triads, but what about 7th chords? Well, all you have to do is take one of these triads and add a 7th interval above the root. This will give you a 4-note chord. There are 2 7th intervals to know, minor 7th, which spans 10 half steps, or a major 7th, which is 11 half steps. So C to B would be a major 7th, while C to B flat would be a minor 7th. Once again, the 7th note will be either a minor or a major 3rd interval above the floor below. So 7th chords are just a continuation of the stacking thirds process. Now we've got a simple framework for 7th chords, let's start with the first type, major 7th. These are constructed by taking the major triad and adding a major 7th interval. As such, you'll see them written as 1, 3, 5, 7. They have a smooth or relaxing feel and a strong association with jazz. Here's how C major 7th sounds with the notes C, E, G and B. Major 7th chords are used frequently in popular music, and the most likely place you'll find them is as the 1 chord in major keys. This keeps the 1 chord diatonic, that is, in the key, but adds some depth and complexity. In jazz, you'll find that the 1 chord is always played as the major 7th. Here's an example in the key of C major to give you a flavour of the major 7th chord. You can also experiment with varying the 1 chord throughout your song if you want to. This can add interest or surprise to later repeats if you have already used the standard major triad for 1 earlier. For example, listen to this C major key progression which starts with C major but ends with C major 7th. Or you could take the approach that John Lennon took in Imagine and move from the 1 major triad to the major 7th in the same bar. This provides direct contrast between the two versions of the 1 chord. It then moves to a 2nd inversion 4 chord. Here's how that sounds in the key of C major. In major keys, you can also diatonically play the 4 chord as a major 7th. 4 major 7th provides a soft landing to move to. This works well with the tonic 1 chord and also its major 7th version. Have a listen to both ideas in the next C major key example. Major 7th chords are also commonly used in natural minor keys. They feature diatonically as the flat 3 and flat 6 chords. Listen to them in this A minor key example. The next 7th chord building to consider is the minor 7th. This is just a minor triad with a flat or minor 7th interval added. So C minor 7th would have the notes C, E flat, G and B flat. Like major 7th chords, minor 7ths have a relaxing, smooth, jazzy feel. They reduce some of the sadness associated with standard minor triads. Minor 7th chords are extremely versatile. Wherever you find a diatonic minor triad in major or minor keys, you can also play it as a minor 7th. So that's chords 2, 3 and 6 in major keys and 1, 4 and 5 in minor keys. You can therefore just take an existing progression that has a minor chord or chords in it and simply replace them with minor 7ths. For example, listen to this 2 chord loop in the key of A minor. It simply alternates from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. When we change from the standard triad version to the minor 7th alternatives, you can hear the smoother, less scary feel. You are also free to mix and match minor 7th chords and major 7th chords within your progressions. These can be wholesale changes, where you play everything as a 7th chord, or use them more sparingly. Remember that songs are never set in stone, so try out some 7th chords and see what you think. For example, you could take this 1, 6, 2, 5 progression in the key of C major and repeat it with all major and minor 7th chords. Listen to how this transforms the sound of the progression. Next up, let's look at the dominant 7th chord house. It's created by using the notes from the major triad and adding a minor 7th interval. So C dominant 7th has the notes C, E, G and B flat. Dominant 7th chords are used widely in blues, rock, jazz and pretty much any genre for their gritty tension. The most common use of the dominant 7th is as the 5 dominant chord in major keys. This is the only place where dominant 7th chords feature diatonically in major keys. If you know about major key chord progressions, then you will know the function of the 5 chord is to create tension and pull the listener back to the 1 tonic chord. If you play the 5 chord as a dominant 7th, then it further intensifies the tension of this cadence, making the relief of the 1 chord even sweeter. Have a listen to the difference in this C major key example. In natural minor keys, you can only diatonically play the flat 7 chord as a dominant 7th. This also provides a pleasing resolution with the 1 tonic. Have a listen to it at work in this A minor key example. In minor keys, you will also commonly see the 5 chord played as a dominant 7th. This is actually a borrowed chord. That means it's not in the key of the song, but temporarily borrowed from another key to use in the current key. Borrowed chords come from parallel keys. That is, keys with the same root or tonic note. For example, A minor and A major keys are parallel keys. The 5 dominant 7th chord in A major is E dominant 7th, So I'll use that in the previous example. Have a listen to how this works in the same way as it did in major keys, providing a strong pull back to the one tonic chord. Dominant 7th chords are a cornerstone of blues, so much so that you will often see all of the chords played as dominant 7ths. This obviously takes you beyond simply borrowing chords, but for now, just listen to how a simple major key progression, using 1, 4 and 5 chords played as dominant 7ths, provides an undeniable blues tension. The problem with 7th chords is that they use 4 notes. Sometimes less is more. If you want to add some interest to your chords, but not use more than 3 notes, you need to learn about sus chords. Watch the video on screen to discover why they are the bridges that every song needs.